So continuing with our orderly process, as I was once again shamed in the Big Ten East. Minnesota went 3-4 last season. Now, as we look ahead to spring and as we try to think about what's going to happen in 21, like they're sitting here with a group that, again, like we talked about Kirk Shiraka, who, by the way, just showed up as an analyst, right?
Mm-hmm. At West Virginia.
At West Virginia. 2019, cooking. Absolutely cooking. Rashad Bateman, Tyler Johnson, Tanner Morgan, Muhammad Ibrahim. Then last year, offense kind of struggled a little bit. Now, Tanner Morgan is back. Muhammad Ibrahim is back. The offensive line from last season, mostly like back together. Now you lose Rashad Bateman, and so being able to get some playmakers to step up on the outside, it's going to be difficult. You're not going to be able to replace somebody of that skill level so easily. But when you look at sort of from the inside out, quarterback, offensive line and such, like, man, this should be an offense that is able to regain some of its form. Now on the defensive side of the ball for Minnesota, because we spent all of our win totals time being like, all right, here's the deal. Minnesota's defense was bad in 2019, but they're all back. And the coaches are telling the reporters that they like the development and they like the steps they're taking. Well, here's the deal. Minnesota went from giving up 5.1 yards per play with that young defense. Then after all that development and the coaches telling the reporters they were excited about the future, those very same players gave up 6.9. So nearly 2 yards per play more given up by the Golden Gophers defense. And good news, Minnesota fans, those same human beings, many of them are also back for the upcoming season. So, yeah, all of my questions and concerns are on whether or not we can believe the Minnesota coaches when they're talking about the positivity and the development that they've got on the defensive side of the ball. I think they should be able to score at a better clip than they did last year. And defensively, they got to get better if they want to be able to escape. What I think is like a general high floor proposition. You know, we're going to spend a lot of time this offseason talking about specific predictions, but I like where Minnesota's at. I also think it's got a low ceiling right now, as long as they are that vulnerable on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's hard to win when you can't get off of the football field. I mean, this is another situation that's similar to Wisconsin to me. Minnesota dealt with so much like players missing for COVID. They lost a lot of guys. Like, I can't remember what it was, the exact numbers, but I remember when they opened the season against Michigan, I know they were missing like 3 offensive line starters. They were missing a bunch of key players from their front 7. We
didn't even know it till kickoff.
Yeah. They were without a lot of
live betting.
Yeah, they were without a lot of key players in key situations that kind of made it hard to really, like, those numbers are awful, but I don't know how accurate they are of a depiction of the actual talent on that team if it's at full strength last year. And I feel like the same way on offensively, but I don't know. Because of that, it's really hard for me to get a good read on this Gophers team, because I was really high on it going into last season before the crap hit the fan and everything blew apart. But this year, I'm just kind of in I don't know. I worry about replacing Rashad Bateman, who I still think had somewhat of a down season last year, but I don't really put that on him as much as everything that was going on around him. And I think that is not an easy person to replace. I know Chris Ottman-Bell is there. He will step up and play a larger role, but I like Chris Ottman-Bell. I don't know if I like him as much as I liked Rashad Bateman. So there's going to be an impact. I think they're going to be able to run the ball because they were able to run the ball last year, and PJ Fleck teams tend to always be able to run the ball. And Muhammad Ibrahim had a big season for them last year. So I don't think that's going to change. So I think offensively, they're still going to be solid. I still think the question is on defense, any improvement there. They do have one kid on the defensive line, Boye Mafe, who I absolutely love. He's one of my favorite players in the country to watch. He's just kind of like a freak athlete at the defensive end position. I think that's a good start. I think he needs to take a step forward and play a bigger role in that defense and have larger impact. And if he does, I think that will help the rest of the defense overall. So that's one thing I'm going to be watching this spring. I think offensive line wise, they've got some dudes. I think PJ's recruited well on the offensive line, and I think they've done some developing. It's just a lot of it was with COVID last year, losing a lot of those guys. I think a full season together, if they could stay healthy, that will improve things. So there's just a lot of questions about this team. And it's one of those situations where it's hard to know what's going to happen, because it's like a situation where if everything goes right, this might not be a Minnesota team that's all that different from what we saw in 2019. But if everything goes wrong, this is a team that could win 3 or 4 games, or if everything falls somewhere in the middle, probably 7-8 win team.
I think it's important to remember what Tom said there about like the context of when some of these points and yards were given up, right? They were missing those guys primarily for the first 2 games of the year, right? And so against Michigan, they gave up 8.6 yards a play, and that Michigan offense was not any good. So I think it's fair to assume that a decent bit of that was related to Minnesota's COVID struggles, and injury struggles as well. Then Maryland, they had most of those guys out still, I believe, right? And they gave up 675 yards to Maryland, which we were like, wait a second. That was the most confusing result of the year, because Maryland had just looked like trash the week before against Northwestern.
Right.
After that, they were merely, I would say, like below average. You know, Rondale Moore and those guys tore them up a little bit, but like they were mostly fine against like Illinois, Iowa-ish, Nebraska, Wisconsin. Like they were okay. I'm a little bit higher on this defense, I think, than some of the projection metrics are. I like some of their talent. Tom mentioned Boye. There's a line. I think their linebacker play is going to be very improved, because I know that James Gordon from Florida is a real talent if he can learn the defense a little better. But if he can't even get on the field, that says something to me about the guys who are on the field, you know, taking steps. I generally am pretty confident in PJ Fleck teams developing receivers. It seems like everywhere he's gone, he's done a good job with having receivers emerge. Ibrahim's back. Morgan's fine. I don't think he's like this no doubt NFL stud type that people were kind of hyping to be last year. My concern is, you were?
Yeah,
you loved him that much?
In my early mock last spring, I had Morgan as like the last pick of the first round kind of QB. Right. And then I got dragged all fall because of the way he was playing. And he did play like crap. I still think there's some of that there. I think his accuracy was just completely gone. And that was the one reason why I had him pegged as a possible NFL QB, was because in 2019, he was very accurate. He was very good with the ball, putting it in all the right spots. And that just was not there last year.
Tools wise, I don't know, just see him as a recruit. I don't know. He didn't pop for me like that, but guys do grow and obviously get better in college. As somebody is about to assassinate Chip, it looks like.
No, this is Adam. He's the appraiser.
Got it. Nice. So my real concern here is Mike Sanford. I thought it was an odd choice to replace Soraka, and his track record of offenses is really not very good. He keeps bouncing around and getting jobs, and maybe I'll look like a dummy for this statement, but I don't get it. So
isn't he a Mike Sanford Jr.?
Yeah, I think so. Like there's a lot of pieces here, man. They think this whole offensive line is going to be like very good. A couple of these guys are going to be NFL guys. This is sort of a now or never year for Sanford, I think.
So what I think I hear you guys all saying, because I watch a lot of crew during the Olympics, and when you see those crew teams rowing, if there's like one little guy who's off, it just throws them down. But if everybody's rowing the boat the same way, they get it all in sync, then they get going. I think that's what I hear you guys saying, and I see why. I think this team is one of those, I'm more on the lines with Tom, like I don't know what I'm going to get. I am concerned because Rashad Bateman, and studying some film for him for draft lead up, like the dude is a baller. He's one of, like, we're always looking around at different teams and we're like, man, who's going to be the guy? You didn't have to look very far. When you popped on the tape of Minnesota, you saw Rashad Bateman stick out, and that, and every defensive coordinator does too. So when they're watching, they're starting to adjust things, and it starts to open up other opportunities. And it also makes it a heck of a lot easier for Tanner Morgan to have as much success as he did 2 years ago. And Rashad Bateman still had a pretty good season this year. Tanner Morgan did not, but I think they just got exposed a little bit more because their defense was so bad. I mean, remember when we thought Michigan, like, oh, Joe Milton looks great. Like, man, maybe this is Harbaugh's year. And it was because they beat Minnesota, and then we couldn't have been more wrong. And I think Chip summed it up too. It's like that dilemma of that returning starter stat, which we all reference, and I think we should, but it's the age-old debate. Well, what if those starters weren't any good? You know, and that's the defensive side of the ball for Minnesota. So I feel like I don't know, like in their development. I covered Sanford when he was at Western Kentucky, and that was a disaster. Like, you talk about a disaster as the head coach when he was there. It was not pretty. So I'm a little bit tentative too about the offense and just trusting Tanner Morgan to get on track. But there is some experience returning if they can get back. I just like this would probably if I'm all in on Wisconsin winning the division, I'm probably looking at Iowa as the next best contender. And then Minnesota might be in that third best kind of spot, maybe. But I could also see it being another subpar season too.